Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about Wall Street. We're going to talk about how it's got its name, some of the history of Wall Street, how it became what it is currently, and then we're going to talk about some of the differences between, say, like what Wall Street represents versus Main Street. Just a bunch of different things to go into so we can get a good understanding of Wall Street. So, first off, Wall Street is an actual street that's located in the lower Manhattan section of New York City, and it's the home of the New York Stock Exchange. And sometimes you'll see that labeled like NYSE, right? Wall Street has also been the historic headquarters of some of the biggest U.S. brokerages and investment banks, right? So let's look at some of the history of Wall Street. Let's see if we can understand it a little bit. So today, the term Wall Street is used as a collective or an umbrella name for the financial and investment community, which includes stock exchanges, large banks, brokerages, securities, and underwriting firms. So today, brokerages are located in multiple locations while providing access to the same information available to, the bigwigs on Wall Street, right? Me and you can get almost the exact same information that anyone else can get, right? So, Wall Street got its name from a wooden wall that the Dutch colonists built in lower Manhattan in the mid to early 1650s to defend themselves from the British and Native Americans. The wall was taken down in about 1700, but like a bad nickname, it stuck. The name stuck. So Wall Street, that area, about the same time, about in the 1700s, early 1700s, it became a center of trade. But it didn't become famous for being like America's financial center until the early 1790s, mid 1790s, when 2 dozen, like 24, 25 of the United States' first and most prominent brokers signed what was called the Buttonwood Agreement. So this agreement outlined the common commission-based form of trading securities. Some of the first securities traded were war bonds, banking stocks such as the First Bank of the United States, the Bank of New York, and the Bank of North America. So the New York Stock Exchange came later, right? In around 1815, 1820 time, uh, that Buttonwood Agreement, which it got its name because that agreement occurred under a buttonwood tree, right? But in this time frame, this agreement was revisited, revised, right? There were some changes made. The organization of brokers renamed themselves as the New York Stock and Exchange Board. So, what this organization did is they rented out space for trading securities in, like a handful of different locations until about the mid 1860s when they found their current location, which is at 11 Wall Street. Now, after World War One, Wall Street and New York City actually ended up surpassing London to become the world's most significant financial center. Right today, Wall Street remains the home of several, you know, important and really big, huge financial institutions. The New York Stock Exchange is still found on Wall Street, as is the American Stock Exchange and several banks and brokerages. Right? So now we're going to get into Wall Street versus Main Street, right? So while Wall Street is often referring to the global finance and investment community, right, it's often compared and contrasted to what's called Main Street, right? And the term Main Street, it's used as a metaphor for like an individual investor, small businesses, employees, like the general overall economy. Like me as an individual, right? I'm Main Street, right? You're Like if you work for, say, a really big company, like they're probably, that's not Main Street, that's Wall Street, right? But if you work for a mom and pop diner, that would be a Main Street, right? So Main Street is a common name for the principal street of a town where most of the local businesses are located. So there's often a perceived conflict between the goals, desires, and motivations of Main Street versus Wall Street, right? Wall Street tends to be, well, it tends to represent, like, say, big businesses, financial institutions, right? And Main Street's gonna, like I said earlier, is gonna end up representing like those mom and pop shops, small companies. You're not gonna see none of these chains. It's not a McDonald's, it's not a Wendy's, it's not a Subway. It's not a Five Guys, it's not an In and Out. Like it's none of those things, right? It's that local store that those people live in that city, stuff like that, right? So let's talk about some special considerations, right? So today, Wall Street is used as an umbrella term to describe the financial markets and the companies that trade publicly on exchanges throughout the U.S., right? So, although Wall Street is an important location where a number of financial institutions are based, the globalization of finance has led to many financial institutions being established around the world, right? Like, think of some of the really big platforms, right? And stuff like that. Like Robinhood, M1 Finance, and stuff like that. Like, go back, you know, 20, 30 years ago, and if they weren't near or on Wall Street, like, it had been really difficult for them. But because it's such a global phenomenon now, I use that term loosely, but because it's so big across the globe and how it is, that they don't need to be there, right? They can be in Ohio, they could be, Australia, London, like, well, they can be anywhere, right? um, Canada, Mexico. Like it doesn't matter where they are, because with how the internet is and how fast data is and stuff like that, and the way that they route your orders and stuff like that, they can be anywhere. They don't have to be on Wall Street anymore. Um, Wall Street, a lot of times, it'll be shortened to just like the street, right? Which is how that term it's frequently used by people, in the quote unquote financial world or in the media, right? So, like, let's take an example. When reporting a company's earnings, like, let's say you're watching, like, Fox News, CNN, whatever the news station is you watch, the analyst on there might compare a a company's revenues to what the street was expecting, right? That might, instead of saying like, oh, Wall Street was expecting, their revenues to be 20 billion and they made 22 instead, right? Or oh, they hit 20 million and the street was expecting them to hit 25, something like that. So in this case, the analyst is comparing the company's earnings to what financial analysts and investment firms were expecting for that period, right? So on the street, all the companies, right, the big firms are like, oh, they all kind of thought this company's going to post earnings of 20 to 25 million, or billion, or however many it's going to be, if they're, and it just depends on, I'm sure one station might refer to it as Wall Street, another station might refer to it as the street. As long as you understand that they're talking about the same thing, right? So to wrap up most of this, just we got a little bit of history. It was a wooden wall, it was a nickname, but it stuck. This is where a lot of the big financial people are. Stuff like that. So it's got a pretty interesting history. And I don't think it should be taken. I want to say not taken for granted, because a lot of people just look at Wall Street. They're like, oh, money grabbing individuals who don't care about you. And, that I'm sure there's some truth in that, but that's not the whole truth, right? So I hope you guys got some good information out of this video. Maybe you learned a thing or two. If you did, can you go ahead and like the video? Go ahead and give me a subscribe if you guys want to. If not, that's fine. That's your prerogative. But I do appreciate you if you stayed through the whole video. And until I see y'all in the next video, y'all be good.